And good evening to all of you out there, wherever you are, somewhere. I'm your host, Michael Decon, Master of Ceremonies. We've got a bit of a rattlesnake for you here tonight, boys and girls. So glad to see all of you in the chat. And of course, we are joined by Mr. Mike Hideous, Paul Cottrell, and Mr. Jeffrey Prather. Let's bring them all in. Gentlemen, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
I could hear you. Is that you, Jeffrey?
I'm here.
Very nice. Mike, are you still with us or are you dead? We might have lost him. But that's how it goes around here. Gentlemen, welcome back for another fantastic evening of a great open discussion that we have for everyone out there to enjoy. And I say this without temerity, but we've been on top of this for several months now, and it's quite amazing. Let's start with you, Jeffrey. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Very nice.
It's nice and warm out here in Tucson.
Very nice. And what about you, Paul? What's it like out there in the Big Apple?
It was sunny today. It's been rainy for the last few days, but today was a good day.
It was a good day, huh?
Yeah, it was a good day. But but there was a little bit of a protest today.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, in Lower Manhattan, that's where City Hall is, and there's a little park right next to the main mansion. And there was probably maybe about 50, 60 people there. Protest lasted for maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But the police came in and they stated to the crowd, I was not at the crowd. I saw a live stream off the internet. And they went to the crowd and said, you must disband. And it was under the executive order of the governor, not the mayor, the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo. So, it's kind of, and everyone was peaceful. I mean, per what I was seeing on the internet, there was nothing, there wasn't really that much of a ruckus. People were having that 6-foot distance. So this is an example that we were talking about earlier, that when people start to protest and try to exercise their civil liberties and question the authority about what's really going on and how it's hurting people, especially with their income, the powers that be don't want to hear it.
Right.
And they'll just go up to the crowd and just say, you must disperse. You're no longer allowed to congregate. And it's our First Amendment to be able to do that. And individuals that have fought for this country have fought for those freedoms. And we need to exercise our civil liberties as citizens.
I agree. And of course, Jeffrey, I'm sure you're not familiar with Dr. Paul Cottrell and vice versa, but Jeffrey is a retired Army officer, ex-DEA special agent, and of course, former DIA intelligence officer. Jeffrey has a lot of intel, and of course, he does his own show called the Prather Report, and it's quite interesting, and I've been catching up with Jeffrey here. And Jeffrey, you had a lot to say about Bill Gates and the George Soros connection. Can you tell Paul Cottrell a little bit about that, Dr. Paul Cottrell?
Sure, yeah. It's the Prather Point, and it's at jeffreyprather.com, and I'm on a local station. But, shows like mine and yours and Michael's here are really the citizen journalists that have defeated the propaganda press, the fake news of the deep state that's been going on for a long time. And I guess you were listening to one of my last shows. So I've been taking people, walking them through deep dives of what COVID-19 is, how it's tied in with Chinese unrestricted warfare. And I moved up forward to where that had tied in to the Democratic Party and the left, I think in my last show or something, because it goes back farther than that. And George Soros, of course, is a great funder of many left-wing movements. He pays for protesters to show up, crisis actors to show up. That's, that is fact. That is record. There is evidence for that. And as a former federal special agent, I dealt in evidence, which is fact. And as a retired intelligence officer, I dealt in intelligence, which is analyzed information. But it's called Wuxi Aptech, in partner with Gilead, which is a pharmaceutical company. And I now do competitive intelligence in the biotech space, and have been doing that for the last few years in depth, is in Wuhan. And George Soros is one of the owners. And back in, I think it was 2012, he bought an institute there for biotech in Wuhan. Of course, Wuhan is where the outbreak happened. At first, they were saying it happened in the wet market, and the wet market has caused SARS-like problems before. But I've always said, and my evidence and intelligence has always shown, that it came out of the Wuhan level 4 biotech lab. And I mean, you can look this stuff up. You can look up Gilead Sciences, and you can look up Wuxi Aptech, which is WUXI Aptech, and you can see that Soros paid for that and built that there, and that Bill Gates was in on that too. Of course, a lot of the press was trying to make Gates out to look like he was very prescient, and there was a lot of people who were prescient about this. It showed up in books, popular Dean Koontz books. But there's a lot more going on behind this, because they were predicting this just about at the same time. And with the World Health Organization also involved, China just gave WHO $30 more million to, if they're going to investigate anything, to, of course, come out on their side. So Soros and Gates partnered with China on COVID-19.
I just have a quick question. My understanding was that when they closed down the Fort Detrick weapons program, and it was shipped over to P4, and further research to gain function for the virus took place under Dr. Shi, when did George Soros start getting involved? And what vehicle was he? Was he investing in the actual Wuhan University, or was he going through some sort of other biotech conduit?
Well, he was initially going. Well, so I'm not familiar with the Fort Detrick shutdown, but what I am familiar with is that the DoD and BARDA. I don't know if you guys know. Do you guys know what BARDA is?
No.
Yeah, go ahead and explain.
So BARDA is the medical arm of DARPA, and DARPA would be kind of like the shield of Marvel for the DoD. Deep research, big bucks, and they sponsored Lieber, Dr. Lieber at Harvard, to work on this. So when and of course the FBI raided and arrested Lieber and his Chinese associates in January when they were trying to smuggle out vials of DNA. That's fact. That's in the affidavits. You can look that up. But I think it was back in 2012. I have to go through my notes that Soros and Gates were working through Bright Gene Biomedical Technology, which again was another Chinese company. And Gilead is partnering with China, and a lot of the big pharma companies partner with China. That's part of the 1,000 Talents program, and Lieber was part of the 1,000 Talents program, which is basically, I can tell you as an intelligence officer who worked in human intelligence, which is spies, it was just an overt spying program. And Lieber was going to Wuhan to pick up his payment money on a regular basis, and he lied about that.
Right.
as well.
Unbelievable.
Right. So, Michael, we brought
Right.
this up mid-February.
Yeah,
we were
we did.
talking about
Pretty
the
wild.
1,000 Talent Plan.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, Jeffrey, I'm really quite aware that the name of your show is the Prather Point, but I've been calling it the Prather Report. I'm not quite sure why, but I've been having a habit of
It
saying
probably
that.
sounds like a report.
That's probably why, and I like it a lot, and I just want people not to be confused. It is called the Prather Point. Check it out with our man here, Jeffrey Prather. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, Jeffrey, just quick question. My understanding is there is a VC in a venture capitalist firm in China that owns shares in Gilead. That venture capital firm is Boyu Capita.
Yes.
Are you?
I thought that was Bohai.
Bohai? It's well,
Bohai,
at least
yeah.
in English, I see it as Boyu Capita.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, all right. So is this something that Soros and Gates is going through, or no?
I don't know exactly. I can tell you that. So after the last time I was activated, and I was activated in 2003 for the second Gulf War because I was dual credentialed as a DEA special agent, a gun carrier, and a DIA representative, an intelligence officer. And I was actually chopped to the DIA was setting up the Counterterrorism Operations Group, CTOG, that fell apart. And so I ran their global operations branch. And after we won that conventional war in 3 weeks, and we all the major nations watch each other fight, and we send officers to learn how to do that. They're often defense attaché officers. I was a DAO as well. And what the Chinese concluded after watching us we won the conventional war in 3 weeks. Then we got bogged down in what was an insurgency, and nobody wanted to call it that, but that's a different story. Until Major Gant of Special Forces got a hold of General Petraeus and said, hey, it's an insurgency and you can't do the same thing. But that's a different story. But what the Chinese decided was nobody can go head to head with the United States. And they're right. There's nothing like the American warrior. When we are turned loose, we are unstoppable. And I'm proud to have been one.
Yes.
And I've got one of my students who just finished basic training. I'm really proud of him, his father and son team. And he's carrying the mantle, and I feel really good about that. So
Nice,
the two
okay.
Chinese officers wrote a paper called Unrestricted Warfare. They said, if you want to take on the United States, then we cannot go militarily against them, even though they're trying to build aircraft carriers, but one caught on fire. They're building islands, but islands like tracers work both ways. We learned that with the Japanese in the Pacific in World War II. And so they are doing whole warfare in the doctrine of Sun Tzu. And that includes Netflix TV shows. That includes the great movie Midway, which was partially financed it was very realistic. I loved it. Great intelligence movie. But it was partially financed by the Chinese because we were fighting with the Chinese against the Japanese in World War II. And you see the football teams, the basketball teams won't speak out against the Chinese.
Yeah.
All of that is part of psychological operations. And I started in SOCOM as a PSYOP officer. And that is a force multiplier. It's, hey, if you surrender to us, then we won't kill you. We'll give you chocolate bars. And that's what the first Gulf War was about. That was why it was so great. So part of that has been to recruit American universities and American scientists, and the American universities are completely infiltrated. Lieber and his two Chinese that were arrested, one of which was a PLA, People's Liberation Army lieutenant that she lied about, it's completely infiltrated, and so are a lot of the pharma companies because they offer these packages. Hey, come on over to China. We'll build you a facility. We'll do things. We'll give you. We'll really help you. And so that's what's been going on. here, the big picture. And China has almost, and may have, and I'm not an economics expert. I don't know. That might be your area, Paul, but it either is equal to us or ahead of us now, because this was the edge of unrestricted warfare for them to stop our economy. I'm saying this was planned. Not only am I saying that COVID-19 was bioengineered and it has HIV elements, and I worked with biotech companies that worked on HIV, and it's CRISPR edited, and CRISPR was declared a WMD by the DoD a couple of years back. A lot of people don't know that, but that they were doing it this time to take the edge so that they could take the lead. They don't want to invade us. They just want to control us. And so part of that is all these drug companies, and then that attitude aligns with the left and Soros, who want to destroy America. So that's why you see Clinton and Soros and all the rest of them working hand in hand with that.
Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a quick for you, Mr. Prather. First and foremost, why is Soros? Why is he so against America? Number one. Two, what's the association with Netflix? And
you're kind of breaking up, but I think you said, what's the association with Netflix, and why is he so against America? Is that what's it?
George Soros, and why George Soros hates America. Could you hear me that time?
Yeah. And
why Netflix or what association Netflix has with China?
Well, I can't speak to why he hates America, but he was helping the Nazis round up other Jews. Again, that's an article. You can look that up. And he is always supporting all kinds of left-wing platforms. You see the Soros money behind all of the Antifa stuff, where those demonstrators would show up, and you'd ask them, and they'd say, "Oh, I got paid $10 to show up here." You'll see you can find the advertisements for crisis actors. As to his personal reasons, that would be a psychologist or a psychiatrist to analyze his quest for power. But what you see with the hyper rich is that they have so much money. You're kind of starting to talk about Bilderberg stuff. Is so they want to control more. They just want more. So that's about the best I can answer for motive. As far as Netflix, when Obama left office, he was invited into Netflix. I can't think of the guy's name. And Susan Rice was invited into that. And Susan Rice, of course, and if you have, people who like Obama or Clinton, that's fine. I'm very respectful of others' points of view. I'll never respect them because my brothers and sisters in federal law enforcement, intelligence, and the military were killed or left to die by them. And I will never forgive them for that. And I will never be silent about that. But Susan Rice is the one who was saying Benghazi was a video. So, my DEA fired me 1 year from retirement after never having a bad evaluation, after trying to make me out to be all kinds of things, a predator, a cult leader. None of it was true. But I was telling them I was extradited in the first Mexican cartel leader, and they were stopping it. They were stopping that extradition. And it later came out in federal court in the Niebla Zambada trial, and you can look it up, where DEA agents raised their hand in federal court and said, yes, we did have a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to allow the Sinaloa cartel through the DEA to run drugs north in exchange for the guns going south through ATF. So as I discovered that this was very stunning to me because I thought I was serving my country, and I was a patriot. I started to uncover, and I went forward and I went backward in my own life, seeing what had happened. But if you look at Netflix, you'll see a surfeit of ideas of the left on there. I mean, my wife and I were watching Designated Survivor for a while because I've been in the White House. I've stood outside the Oval Office. It's cool. I've been in the White House Situation Room. It's cool. But then all of a sudden, the president's wife dies, and his transvestite somebody is on the bed in the quarters with his 9-year-old daughter. Well, that's clearly propaganda. There's just no doubt about that.
My goodness.
That's on the show. That's when we stopped watching the show.
By the way, Michelle Obama actually has a documentary coming out on Netflix, by the way.
Well, I am very well aware of the Michelle Michael allegations. I don't know anything about that.
Understood.
I knew a lot of the Secret Service who worked for some of the other presidents, like Clinton. I heard all the stories about Hillary before they ever broke. I heard them from the Secret Service because they would shoot at the Quantico range. I was a firearms instructor. So I heard all those. I don't know whether those Michelle things are true or not. I've seen the videos. But when I see, I do know what psychological operations look like because I was a PSYOP officer. And
that's right.
And TV and movies and film and video our major way to input is visual. And today everybody is just overwhelmed with that. And when I see, on the show Designated Survivor, the president's transvestite whatever on up on stage and then on his bed talking to his 9-year-old daughter, then I start to think, well, maybe this is true.
That's pretty wild stuff. So all of us I have the impression that all of us have come to an agreement that SARS-CoV-2 was in fact created in a biolab.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the stance I'm taking, and that the genesis was actually in the United States.
Right.
You're right. You're exactly right. I totally agree. And I work in the competitive intelligence biotech field, and in that field, there's no doubt.
Yeah. And by the way, this is just me jumping to conclusions here, but the fact that this virus was moved around so many times, it makes me sort of think in a way that this virus wasn't a complete virus, that this is an unfinished virus, and everyone was sort of chipping at it slowly. Maybe I'm dead wrong on that assumption, but that's what I'm sort of led to believe.
Well, there's, there are multiple lines.
Right.
There was we were talking about the scientific line, and it bifurcated for a weapons program. And there's multiple scientific lines in different labs, and there's multiple weapons lines. How much leaked out? I don't know. And was it leaked out on purpose? I don't know either. But
it's hard to say. Yeah.
We do know that viruses will mutate, naturally in the population once it's out. So there's going to be multiple, quote, lineages that we'll see. In the literature right now, they're talking about there's 3 different main versions, main strains that are hurting people. A, B, and C is what they're calling them.
Right.
But if you look at the genome, what's been published at the NIH database, the genome for all these different Wuhan viruses, there's some mutations, but I wouldn't call them radical, where they're like have huge gain of function. I'm concerned, and I don't think we've seen it yet. I'm concerned that it's going to lose affinity to that ACE2 receptor and start gaining more and more affinity to that CD147 receptor. And that's why we're starting to see the non-ARDS hypoxia, where you have that red blood cell and T cell
Right.
getting infected. And like we talked about before, that is very reminiscent of AIDS, where it was infecting the T cells. And my concern is that this goes dormant when T cells can go into a memory phase. There's the memory T cells. So they can go into like G0 phase. And that means it doesn't multiply. So is there a latency component? If I was to design a weapon, I would want an acute phase and I'd want a chronic phase. The acute phase is what we're seeing right now. People get infected, they get sick, they get weak. The chronic phase is it goes dormant and it starts to pop up with rare diseases. Very similar to AIDS that happened in the 80s. A lot of people don't know this, but people that were dying from AIDS in 1983 and 1984 were infected in 1974 or 1975 because of this chronic latency that I'm talking about. The acute phase of HIV-1 is about 3 to 6 months. Then it goes into a chronic phase that lasts for years before you actually start seeing the manifestations of what we would call AIDS.
Right.
So this is what I'm worried about with this virus, is that there's a chronic phase to it.
And you're right about the virus mutating. We've seen it mutate already several times, and that's why I'm under the impression that a vaccine for this would take a great amount of time.
I don't believe they have a vaccine.
You don't
If they
believe
couldn't
that?
get a vaccine for regular MERS or SARS, there's no way that they can, do this Operation Warp Speed and say we'll have a vaccine. I don't believe it. I don't believe it at all.
What are your thoughts, Jeffrey? Are you under the same notion that there is no vaccine?
No, I think there is. Now, first of all, I agree with everything else you were saying. You're kind of getting over my head. I'm not a medical doctor, but the S protein sequences of the COVID-19 share patterns with the MERS COVID, but not with the previous lineages. But they have that furin cleavage feature, which is kind of like the CRISPR editing, so that you potentially, and this is why the DoD declared CRISPR a WMD, is you can insert stuff later. And the reason I don't think there is a vaccine, and I think that the hydrochloroquine and the UV light and all that stuff works, is because if it is a weapon, and I say it is a weapon, and of course it's violating treaties, but I'm saying it's one piece of a weapon in unrestricted warfare, then you always want to have an antidote to your weapon. Otherwise, you can't control it being unleashed. Now, that doesn't mean that governments don't do stupid things. I mean, the Japanese, and I've been a student of Japanese martial arts for over 50 years. Little Japanese island looks at America and goes, "Yeah, we can take them." I mean, people do stupid things all the time.
Sure.
But I think that there is an antidote, because I think that if you look at the totality of the evidence and the intelligence, which is what I do, and on my show I say I'm America's intelligence officer. I think that there is an antidote so that you can recover from it. And as far as the idea of China waging drug warfare, fentanyl, all the fentanyl is coming out of China. Now, I got 4,000 and 10,000 pounds of marijuana. I got 2,000 pounds of cocaine at one time. I worked some big cases. I worked some heroin cases. I never worked any fentanyl cases, but I did see Chinese illegals coming through Nogales. But that piece fits too, that they are doing that. I mean, that's fact. The fentanyl mainly comes out of
China. Right.
Well, I think that the whole fentanyl thing is really their version on us of the opium wars. They're trying to weaken us for their,
totally agree.
For their expansion plan in 2025. Because I really believe that they're going to do they're going to try to control the first island chains.
Yep,
and
they're
they're going to.
trying now. Our Navy is sparring with theirs now, right now.
It's interesting times. It seems like we might be headed into some sort of conflict with China in due time.
Now, not just for clarification,
Go ahead.
an antidote not necessarily means it's a vaccine. So there may be therapeutics that could help us fight this. And that's why I was saying I don't believe that there's a vaccine, but there probably is some sort of therapeutic out there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think they're pushing this remdesivir, because I think research behind the scenes knew that this was a viable alternative to fight this, and that ties into that Boyu Capita being tied into Gilead. So yes. I think that whoever knew the game, what was going on, knew to put their chips on Gilead.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think we're in total agreement. You're right. I did not delineate between vaccine and antidote. And by the way, I found in 2010, Soros invested in the company Wuxi Pharmatex. It's since then changed to Aptech and announced plans to build a $100 million R&D center in Wuhan, China.
Crazy. And by the way, I just wanted to quickly ask you, Paul, is azithromycin not so well? The Z-Pack, is that not very effective?
Well, just Z-Pack alone wouldn't help. But when they are doing the hydroxychloroquine with the Z-Pack and zinc, for certain cohorts of patients, especially if you catch it early, it does work.
Understood.
Fascinating.
Oh, yes. And Mike, you were right about the fentanyl, of course, in China.
Yeah, unfortunately. They are just screwed up people. They're governments.
Yes, and that brings me to another thing that we should mention quickly here. Me and Mike had interviewed someone out there in China, a teacher, and it seemed like he was pretty much clamped down by the CCP quite heavily, right, Mike?
Yeah, based on some of the questions that I had asked, as Michael had asked, I wasn't satisfied with some of the answers he was giving. I felt that he had toned down, sort of, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Yeah, he just, in my opinion, he just wasn't answering straightforward. I mean, no disrespect. I didn't seem to get the answers yet.
Well, that's because he didn't want to get killed.
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what true. I said to him.
Yeah, he didn't want to get killed.
I mean, there's about a week ago, there was some part of the left wing in America praising, the Chinese propaganda guy was telling everybody to come to. I'm sure you saw this. Come to China. You can walk around, and it wasn't Pompeo, but it was somebody else said, well, if you're going to be so free, I'd like to talk to, and she just started listing all the disappeared.
Right.
Can you undisappear this person? Can you undisappear that person? And there's also been reports of caskets with screams as they were incinerating them.
Yeah, what's your take about the crematoriums and the news saying that they were running 24/7? They're only stating that they have maybe about 4,000 deaths. There's no way they had 4,000 deaths when New York City alone has over 18,000. What's your take on that whole thing?
They're lying, and the left wing media. I'm talking about CNN and MSNBC buying into these ridiculous numbers. It's a total lie. But because most of us have never worked in a tyrannical society, and I have worked in countries like that, and it's a very different mindset that that the government is God. But those numbers don't make any sense. I mean, you do other things. If you do overhead imagery, even Google Earth, the hospitals they built are basically prisons that's painted white, but all the rooms have bars on them. and then all the crematorians. Plus, if you put intelligence in there, where they about 25 to 30,000 Chinese cell phone went silent.
Yeah.
If you start adding the other intelligence in, that's how you build a picture of what's going on. But again, intelligence isn't evidence. Intelligence is analyzed information from various sources. Evidence is in court. Here's the fact. But certainly by looking at the evidence and the intelligence together, COVID-19 is bioengineered. It was either released on purpose or, I've heard that there was some kind of gunfight with intel agents in the Wuhan wet market. I don't know. That's just rumint. That's there's human intelligence. There's SIGINT, signal intelligence. There's also rumor intelligence, and but it's certainly like Paul said, it started with a research purpose at Harvard, then went to Canada, then got stolen, got over there, and went to their lab and somehow got out. But the timing of it, this is the other big thing that makes me, the intelligence points me to that it was purposefully released and it wasn't an accident, because Trump just had signed a new agreement with China.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed the dynamic completely. But there's a clause in that trade agreement that says if there's an act of God kind of thing, then the trade agreement is null and void. And I think there was an internal struggle that went on inside the Communist Party that we can't see. And I think that's also, this is kind of getting deep dive, but this is what we do is.
That's all right.
I think that ties into North Korea, because it's going back and forth. Is Kim Jong Un dead? Is he alive? Is it the sister there or not? And there was a Chinese team that went in there. And so the analogy I make there is that if you haven't seen Midway, go see Midway. It's a great movie. It's very realistic. And the movie opens with the Naval Intelligence Officer Layton talking to Yamamoto. Yamamoto is the guy who planned Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto liked us. He had been here, and he told the army tyrants, "You don't want to take them on. They're good people, but they're tougher than you think." I think that, so Roosevelt had blockaded Japan, and he was talking about that, and so Roosevelt was pushing us into war, because Roosevelt knew it was coming, but as Americans, we don't like to get involved. But Roosevelt knew it would be a lot tougher to launch Operation Overlord it was tough enough to launch it across the channel. Launching it from America would be.
See, my understanding of the history of this is that Roosevelt was trying to prevent more advancement on the mainland, Asian mainland, and so they were going to cut the oil.
Yeah, they did cut the oil. You're right.
Right. And then that was really what was the catalyst for them to try to knock out our Navy at Pearl Harbor.
Well, where was our main interest, in China or in Europe? And Churchill was calling up Roosevelt all the time and asking him, and
Right.
he said we didn't have the will to do it. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt celebrated.
Right,
Because he
right.
knew the last line of Roosevelt's fame. If you haven't seen Dunkirk, that's another one you should see. And
That's a great movie. I saw that. That's an awesome movie. Yeah.
And he sees at the end, it's where the troops are getting blooded. They're learning that they're going to have to fight hard. And at the speech, he goes, "We'll fight in the beaches, we'll fight in the fields, we'll fight in the colonies." But the last line of the speech is that people forget is until in God's good time, the new world, that's us, comes to rescue the old. That's the last line of Churchill's speech. So my analogy here is that when Trump, so I was stationed in South Korea. I know the border there well, just like I know the border here well. And when Trump went up there and the fences came down and the troops shook hands and crossed over and this relationship started to happen, Trump was doing the same thing to the client state of China that Roosevelt was doing when he blockaded Japan. And that was also to force China's hand into the trade agreement. And so I think that they got pushed, and I think that they unleashed this, and I think it's the biggest mistake they ever made.
So
I think.
Can I ask a question real quick? Are you saying that when President Trump started talking with North Korea, that is what set off China?
I think that was one of the major factors, because so if you look at a satellite picture of North Korea and South Korea, there's no lights. Those people are eating grass. They're eating each other. Those people think he's a god. They are 40, 50, 60 years behind us. So China is starting to develop a middle class, a capitalist system. Right now, it's nation state capitalism, but that will change as wealth comes. So as that happens, that's why the Dems and the left like what's happening right now, because they've shut down the economy. Everybody is dependent upon the government as opposed to running their own business. The engine of America is small business. You don't need the government much. So that's why this is a great alliance for the left and for China, because China wants to keep control. But if Trump, and of course North Korea has always relied on China, but if Korea opens up to Trump and South Korea is a powerhouse economy, then all that manufacturing, all that stuff that went to China starts to go to North Korea. They stop eating each other. They stop eating grass. They start making stuff. They start building up some economy. That then increases the Chinese economy as well, the middle class economy, brings it on up with Americans, because we live really well here in America. We have very little real poverty. I've seen real poverty. There's very little of it in America. It's mostly on Appalachians and on Indian reservations. And then the Chinese state loses control, just like the left will lose control, because they're all about big government. So that's what I think is happening. That's an eagle-eye view.
And just to lighten the mood for a second, if you guys haven't seen the movie called The Interview,
It's a great movie.
All right, just want to make sure you're aware of that. Okay,
that is a great movie. Yes, really.
Because I didn't know if it would...
Especially when he's training and he sticks this tape on him or something and kills himself or something. Yeah, that's hilarious.
I just wanted to make sure, because I think sometimes that was that real life is based on that movie.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
I'm a big fan of John Wick series.
It's a good series, actually.
Oh, and the thing is that the filming of the Continental, I live right next to that.
Wow. It's
actually a Japanese restaurant. They close it down and then they do the filming for the Continental.
Well, my handgun
Street.
martial arts center, HMAC, is a martial art on the handgun that I founded 10 years ago. And really, it's basically John Wick. We're really trying to save lives, not kill all the bad guys. But using the handgun as a martial art is that. And that's at warriorschool.com. I'll put myself in a shameless plug there, and it's pretty cool. It's
okay.
When you mention handgun martial arts, you know what comes to my mind? Someone taking a pistol, beating you with it, and not shooting it. What exactly is pistol martial arts?
Well, so I've been in martial arts for over 50 years. I'm a Daishihan in the Bujinkan. In my martial art, I'm a senior master, and I'm a student of the Grandmaster. And so I've done, with my Warrior School company, I've trained over 20,000 U.S. military of every branch, all the intelligence agencies, most of the federal law enforcement agencies. And that's petered off now, but because it was for pre-deployment courses. But 10 years ago, I founded HMAC, Handgun Martial Arts, which is the American martial art, because we were founded with weapons, Paul Revere. And so it's everything about shooting from very close to very far, to one gun, to two guns, and it is there's retention, there's disarmament, but it's not just beating someone with the gun.
Okay.
Because if you look at if you go to warriorschool.com, you'll see handgun martial arts, and there's belt ranks. So it's different than one of my courses where, like the military would go to a 5-day pre-deployment course, and then they'd go to the rock pile or the sandbox, or I'd teach CCW. I've been an NRA law enforcement pistol rifle shotgun instructor. I was a DEA primary firearms instructor, CCW, all that stuff. I'm published a lot in SWAT and a lot of tactical magazines. But this is for someone who wants to develop themselves as a personal American protector warrior. And that's what I believe the American warrior is, that we're protectors. So we have to be better with our handgun than the bad guys are that walk into a church or a school with a rifle. And we have to account for every shot, where terrorists just spray. Actually, they're trained to just spray. So there's a lot to it. I mean, we have an oath. We keep and bear arms, affirming our inalienable creator-endowed rights, training in handgun martial arts, neither for sport nor competition, but for the refinement of the virtues of the citizen warrior, establishing justice, and always at the aid of divine providence, defense of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So there's a lot of constitution in there, and a lot of spirituality as well.
Absolutely, and my hat goes off to you, and great thanks for what you do.
By the way, Paul.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly mention, you did move out of your apartment there, right?
Yeah, in Lower Manhattan, I moved out, and
Okay.
I moved to a different location within the Manhattan borough.
And it wasn't because of your neighbor someone in your building getting COVID-19, correct?
Well, there was someone in my building that did get COVID-19, but I had it planned to move out 6 months ago. Yeah, it wasn't related to that.
Interesting. Go ahead, Paul.
So the question I have, Jeffrey, is what's your take on the One Belt Road, that hegemonic power that China is trying to make in the Middle East and in the North, in North Africa? How does that relate to AFCOM? And why aren't we playing buddy with Russia? I would think a two-front war on China would be a better strategy than not to align with Russia.
I agree.
So at least in the media, it just seems that Putin's bad, Russia's bad, China's good, and that's not the reality of what's happening geopolitically.
Nope.
Well, you're very knowledgeable. So, after 9/11 was an abysmal intelligence failure. There were FBI agents in Arizona here that wanted to investigate. There were guys learning how to fly out here in Tucson that weren't learning how to land. A guy I served with in DIA, Tony Schaefer, had data mined Osama, and nobody wanted to pay attention to that. There's a hero, by the way, Rick Rescorla, who was a veteran of the We Were Soldiers battle, who was the intelligence officer, corporate security for Morgan Stanley in the second tower. And he had predicted an attack by air because the previous attack had been by ground. He got all his guys out. He died going back in to get other people out. A true hero and excellent intelligence officer. But we went into Afghanistan. Bush says who, Tenet says Osama. He says who can go, Colonel. He's a general now. He's retired. He's legendary, and I can't think of his name. But fifth group says we can go now. And if you haven't seen 12 Strong, that is the special ops movie to see. It's
Yes, I have first,
that. All due respect to the SEALs, but it's the Green Berets going in, and that's the true story. And within 3 or 4 months, they had wiped out Taliban, Al Qaeda. And then we shifted our attention. So that's really done. There's no rebuilding of Afghanistan. There was never anything to rebuild. Where the fight is now is in Africa, just like you said. everybody has moved into there. Why? Because there are not functioning governments in Africa. SOCOM is quietly all over Africa. Third group is all over Africa, working missions. They're doing great stuff. You did hear a couple Green Berets get killed a while back because they were doing FID. In my day, I did FID when I was with 7 Special Forces. That's Foreign Internal Development. That's where you're just training the soldiers. And in wartime, you do UW, unconventional warfare. That's what ODA 595 did in Afghanistan in the movie. But that's happening. That's going on as we speak quietly. It's not being broadcast. Trump isn't telling everybody what we're doing and letting them know. And then the other part of your question is why do we need to align with Russia? Well, we don't need to align with Russia because the Russian-Chinese border has always been a conflicted border. Sometimes those guys are fighting hand to hand. They're always worried about each other. That's nothing new. So we can let them worry about each other. It is a two-front. We don't have to make any kind of alliance with them for that problem to exist. It already exists. There is not a communist hegemony in existence there. They're in competition against each other. So,
may I ask one question, Jeffrey? Do you think that President Bush handled the retaliation for 9/11 correctly with Bin Laden by giving him what was it, like a month or two advance to get away? And why don't we just go in? I mean, we were just bombing caves, and as far as I'm concerned, Bin Laden was gone because the news was broadcasting, yeah, we're going to go and bomb Afghanistan. Well, all you got to do is turn on the news to find out what we're going to do militarily, and the enemy gets away.
Yeah, that's very well known. I volunteered for that one. I didn't get activated for that one. And then when I didn't volunteer, they activated me. So that's how the government works. But you talk to any of those guys, and I've been privileged to talk to some of those awesome guys that they had him. What they needed was, and this was SF. This was Special Forces. I was a military intelligence officer, but I'm so privileged that I got to serve in 7 Special Forces Group. And they had him, and they had developed great relations. But what happened was that Bush did not let him commit the troops on the border of Pakistan. He was timid about that, to seal that border from him going. Of course, we know where he ended up. And the other thing was, so Bush is wrong, but there was also this conflict within the military, and this is kind of really inside. But so SF gets over there, 595 gets over there, and then Triple Nickel 555 goes in, and they're actually killing terrorists. And everybody in SOCOM hears about that and wants to get in there. And so the third team goes down south, and they insert not with they're indigenous people. I can't think of what they're called up there. They're great allies of ours.
The Yazidis?
No, not them. I can't think of their name. But anyway, an A team's down there, an ODA, Operation Attachment A team, and a B team comes in. And so I was on a B team. I was part of staff. I supported the A teams. I was never on an A team, never claimed to be on an A team. I got to go to some courses, but never on an A team. But the B team wanted to jump ahead of the A team to get some. They wanted to get in the fight. Well, before we deploy, we do a train up. That is, we zero our weapons, we do all our drills, we make sure we got everything squared away, and we do that for about a week or so, and then we go. And so we're ready when something happens. The B team doesn't do that because the B team isn't supposed to be the fight. The B team doesn't need to be in country for one A team. B team needs to be in country that there's like 5 A teams spread out. But the B team jumped ahead of the A team, and they got in a fight. And the JTAC, which is a very experienced Air Force Special Operations guy, had a new device, and they got in a fight, and they wanted to call in a JATM, a joint. It's a big bomb, and because he had not trained on that device, he accidentally plugged in his own coordinates.
Oh my!
And so they bombed themselves.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
that's
And
terrible.
and you know, the B team had no business jumping ahead of the A team. B team shouldn't be in the country, as far as I'm concerned. And I was on a B team. So then later, because SF is getting some, and everybody wants to get some. We all want to kill bad guys. We want to, it's on it's on my bucket list. Shoot a terrorist in the eye. I'm 63. I'm
Yeah.
probably not going to get it, but is it on my bucket list? Hell yeah, it's on my bucket list. And,
Yes.
And because I'm old, but I'm still a warrior. But
Hell yeah.
But anyway, so then Delta comes in, and Delta gets the mission to get Bin Laden. Now I'm getting back to your question. Well, the mission statement, and everything is key. The mission statement is what tells us, it's a commander statement of everything we can do, everything we should do, and everything we can't do in like a 1 sentence or 2 sentence. It's carefully crafted. It's part of the brief back. It's a big deal. And the mission statement was get Bin Laden, but with indigenous forces. So if it was just Delta going to go in there, or 6, which is CAG and Dev now, then that would be their mission. But when it said indigenous forces, that's SF. SF is who works with best, who works with Indig. They are the best at it. So they should have kept that mission. Well, that's when they didn't get him. That's when that Delta guy, he's dead now, great guy, said wrote the book Kill Bin Laden, but they didn't. And then as they rotate out, 6 comes in. And 6 doesn't listen to the terrain, and because everybody wants to get some, just like why we went into, well, that's not quite true. Iraq, there was intelligence that there was WND there, but so it was a combination of executive timidness, in my opinion, and military competition. Same thing that happened on Eagle Claw, the first Delta Force operation to rescue the Iranian hostages, is everybody wanted to have a part of it. So the Marines wanted to fly the CH-47s. They weren't used to flying night vision, and that's when the CH-47 sliced into the 130, if you guys remember back that far.
I do. I remember that day.
And out of that came Task Force 160, SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, because they needed their own dedicated guys, and those guys are unbelievable.
Pretty ridiculous.
What do you think about rumors, or I should say the hearsay of how some people say, well, is the Israelis were the ones who were involved in 9, so that we would get involved in killing Arabs?
I think the Israelis kill Arabs just fine on their own.
That's true.
So do I.
Well, what's funny is, because I'm Jewish, I had to do 5 years of Hebrew school when I was younger, and every single one of my
wife is Jewish. She speaks and writes Hebrew.
Great.
I'm missing Shabbat right now to talk to you.
Well, that's so my teachers. But all my teachers in Hebrew school, they all came from Israel, and the way they run the show over there is it's mandatory to serve in the armed forces.
Right.
So all of my teachers, knew what it was like to be in the military, and some of them drove tanks. So they were serious. They
all carry guns.
Yeah.
Long guns.
Yeah. So I mean, they didn't take any BS in school at all. But yeah, that's just a little history of mine.
Understood.
In the early 80s.
There and Entebbe, is everybody studies Entebbe, and it's a fabulous, op, and yeah. And they also do behavioral detection as opposed to these ridiculous TSA things that we all go through, which has a 99% failure rate. But yeah, I don't think that I've been on other shows too, and I've said I don't think that the government blew up the towers, and people got mad at me, and it was a huge intelligence failure. The report just came out that said Building 7 didn't fall. That looks like it was blown up, but from what I know, and I was at ground zero on both places afterwards, the bad guys flew those planes into those buildings.
You were at Ground Zero.
No, not at the time. Afterwards.
Oh, afterwards. Okay. I thought you were there maybe that morning. I thought, wow.
No,
That's
but
intense.
I'll tell you, I worked in Manhattan. I worked at DEA in Manhattan when they were trying to fire me, and so I got to know the New York DEA guys. And I'll tell you, funny.
Is that off of Water Street? Or no?
Well, I can't remember. They filmed Legend there with Will Smith right there. They filmed that.
I thought there was a building off of Water Street in Lower Manhattan. That was where the DEA was, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Can't remember the name. But
just real quick, I just wanted to say my pop was at Ground Zero afterwards. He was there because he used to be an EMC, an emergency management coordinator for the city of Paterson, New Jersey. And after 9/11, he actually got a chance to win there. He was escorted by the Army just to be an assistant in helping out with anything that I guess the city of New York needed at the time.
Well, that's awesome. There were EMT guys from all over the country. My neighbor is retired. He went. Everybody just got up and went.
Yep.
The DEA guys from New York went down to Ground Zero. And this shows you how corrupt the DEA had become by then, like the FBI, like the CIA, is they were told not to go.
Interesting. And by the
they
way,
they went anyway.
Yeah. By the way, Jeffrey, you mentioned this in the opening of your show. You mentioned the FBI and Michael Flynn. I'm sure now you feel a bit more vindicated.
Well, sure. I mean, I've known this for.
But we've known
this. We have known all this forever.
Right.
It's all there. It's just been covered up by the propaganda press, fake
it's
news.
Not surprising, in other words. Yeah.
It's the FBI, and I went to the FBI Academy. It's really cool. There's a lot of tradition there. I've got some great, I can't think of his name now, but I'm friends with the hero of the Miami gunfight. I've worked with a lot of FBI, but the FBI has become so corrupt. I suppose it may be that the ground agents are still good, but it is just, the FISA warrants are all perjured. They're no good. They set up Flynn. They set up Papadopoulos. They changed reports. It just came out. Pienta is there on all that. It's just a mess.
It kind of makes you knowing that there are people out there such as ourselves who I consider to be logical men who can assess such information and assess it logically, and then you hear about these tragic things where people were in the FBI gone, rogue, so to speak, and just corruption and really makes me sick. I mean, what about you guys?
Oh yeah, it's terrible because this was my whole career. This was my whole career was, military, federal law enforcement, and intelligence.
They try to screw you.
The inflection point for the FBI where it went really south of heaven was right when they closed the X-Files.
Right. Good point. No, you're right about that.
Because, Mueller would get things done, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. He definitely would. No doubt about it. And by the way, going back to vaccines for a moment here, I did want all of your opinions on our friend Bill Gates. I have some audio here that I wanted all of you to listen to. Let's roll that audio.
And the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, I think this is proof positive that there is a forced vaccine program that they're pushing, and they're eventually going to go into a some sort of tagging or surveillance or this guy that Bill Gates has been pushing this vaccine thing for years.
He really has. He's been pushing very hard.
And then I love how he phrases that mass gatherings is optional. Like our constitutional free and our constitutional our constitutional exercising our constitutional rights is optional. It's amazing with him.
Let's play that clip one more time.
In the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities, like mass gatherings, may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
Yeah, see, like what right does he have to even have that statement to say that you can't assemble unless you have the correct antibody?
Yeah, who is he? Shut up and work on your stupid programs, you dumbass.
I mean, if he couldn't create software that didn't give you the blue screen of death every time you opened up an application.
That's right.
You really trust a vaccine program that guy's touting? I don't.
It's a little insane.
I don't understand how he could have such a thing, or is he just pushing for it?
Well, you're a big
he's
funder.
on the take. I mean, he's in a position to make money on this.
Right. He donates lots of money. That's why. So he gets a say on your life.
And all that donation, that whole philanthropic foundation he has is that to be able to maintain his wealth and not get taxed.
So the question remains, gentlemen, are you willing to take the magical vaccine Bill Gates has concocted?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think that we as a nation need to stand up and say no to this. We need to say no to decashing, because we should have the ability to take money out of the bank if we really want to. If they decash us, we're forced in their monetary system. And they'll push that negative interest rates, and you have no recourse after that. I'm totally against ID 2020, and the surveillance of 5G is a surveillance technology on us. It's a ubiquitous technology. You can never opt out. And this idea of forced vaccines, I'm not anti-vax.
That's right.
But I am totally against forced vaccines.
As you should.
I mean, they need your consent.
Yeah, definitely. And we may not have a choice.
And we as citizens need to stand up and say, hell no.
We may not have a choice, though, as our civil liberties hang in a balance now. And Jeffrey, what's your take?
Well, I certainly believe in vaccines, because LA with the illegals coming in, the bubonic plague is there, coupled with
typhoid.
And the waste and the rats with the homeless there. There is a culling of the herd coming there, doubtless. But the vaccine that Gates is talking about, you're right, Gates didn't do great software, but he got great control of markets. And that's what I think he's trying to do here. And the digital tattoo stuff, which as a chaplain sounds eerily reminiscent of Revelations to me, is certainly not important. And there's also talk about microscopic tracking mechanisms, nanotubes inside these vaccines as well. So I'm concerned about that as well.
But what do we do? What do we do? I mean, you were part of different organizations in the government. What do we do as citizens to stop this?
Well, I think that we need to. So on Netflix, there's a show which I was surprised about, Waco, because I was going through.
I saw that.
Yeah, very good.
It was pretty good. It was a lot better than the narco stuff. There was a couple things it didn't show, and I knew the FBI HRT sniper who was at Ruby Ridge and at Waco. I knew Lon Horiuchi, personally a nice guy. But I can tell you that when I was there were probably 30 guys in my class. It was snowing. It was like 93, and we're watching everything burn. And from my native heritage, I'm very familiar with the government and the Army murdering Native women and children. It happened to every nation over and over. It happened here in Tucson, Camp Grant massacre of Apaches. Even worse, by Ta'ana O'odham, by another Native tribe. So for me to see the government burning up women and kids is not new. But I will tell you, I was the lone voice of saying, I don't know what's going on there, but I do know that those women and children should not be being burned up, because those women and children didn't sign up like I did for a fight.
You know, the one thing I got about that film is how I felt, despite what, I mean, it seemed to me that there was no child abuse going on. What I got from it was they were breaking down the freedom of religion, the right to worship whatever you want. I may not have agreed with what David
Kardashian. There you go. That's a good one. By the way, thank you, Christina. Amazing.
Help me out here. Back me up. What was this guy's name? Koresh. Thank you.
There you go.
Koreshians. I may not agree with what they were worshiping, but it seems to me like their ability to do what they want was being taken from them based on a rumor that they thought children were being abused. Am I correct on that?
Well, the original thing was, and again, you got to remember, I was the DA liaison to ATF, so I worked at ATF offices, and it was originally ATF. This after Ruby, so Ruby Ridge is where ATF guy shoots the son of a ex-SF guy, and then the FBI sniper comes in and kills his wife while she's holding his baby. 2 SWAT teams left because they changed the ROE, the rules of engagement. Because there's just 2 pillars for deadly force. It's fear for life and grievous bodily harm. That's the only time, and it has to be imminent skills and ability to happen. You under Texas law, and I also know some of the intelligence people who worked on this. So under Texas law, with parental permission, you can marry at 14. It looks like he had sex with some 13-year-olds. As well.
Good
there
Lord.
were no illegal weapons found. And at the end, he certainly wanted to fulfill his apocalyptic dream of dying. And where I disagree with, I was just talking about this last week to an Intel friend of mine, is the person knows someone who was in there saying that there were bales of hay. And I said, well, they filled it up with CS and then they fired incendiaries in there, and everybody knows what happens. And that even happens with individual cops. They'll CS somebody and then they'll taser them and then they light them on fire. It's happened over and over again. We should know not to do that by now. But I think that the FBI started that fire as well. But then afterwards, what did they do afterwards? You guys know what happened after?
In the film?
No, in real life.
No.
Okay, and you can look. And again, when I say fact, you can look it up on YouTube. Okay, then so that's a crime scene, right? That's a
right.
That's
They
a
just let the thing burn down.
Not just let it burn down. They bulldozed all the evidence into the fire.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And I've also seen the FLIR, forward-looking infrared radar, images of gunfire coming from the APCs, and I know what that looks like. And they're saying it's them taking fire, but I can tell you clearly it's them giving fire. The same thing happened with the Finkums up there in Oregon, and I was on I did a speech and a prayer request, and I was down at the federal courthouse. And I knew the friggin' marshals that were standing there, if you remember that incident. And that was an L-shaped ambush. First they said 1 shot, and then the phone video from inside the car came out where they just kept shooting at him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, if you just start looking at the FBI, and so that Waco and Ruby Ridge would be the turning point to me, and when the FBI changed their mission from white collar crime to counterterrorism. And
but here's the issue that I have with New York City. All right, I understand that there maybe there still is, but definitely there was a terrorist problem, in the early 2000s. All right, that's obvious. But now, since we've killed the bad guys, why don't we go back to a pre 9/11 day where I don't see the NYPD in these counter terrorist outfits carrying around M16s? Going down, Broadway. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I'm living literally in a police state. There's a point in time where the citizens need to say, you know what? The police have too much military equipment, and it's our tax dollars that are paying for it. Our city taxes are paying for this. I mean, we're slowly. The problem is that every city in the United States, and they're creeping into a military zone, and it's not right. That's not what this country is about. If we have bad guys, we go kill them, but not everyone in our society. In our society is a bad guy, and that these agencies should be not viewing the citizens as the bad people. But yet, the way they're running these agencies, it's as if the citizen's bad and the citizen has to prove that they're good, not the other way around. The agency needs to prove that someone in the society is a bad guy. I am innocent until proven guilty. But these agencies are running rogue. They're saying, I think you're a bad guy, and I'm going to take all your property, and I'm going to bury you with a bunch of legal costs, and then maybe you'll get out of it alive. I mean, look at what happened to Roger Stone. Look at what happens to other people, where all these agencies are running rogue, and they're attacking people. And I live in a police state, and which is New York City.
Yeah, you haven't even mentioned.
It's unacceptable that the NYPD has military equipment. There is no reason for that.
That's right. I was going to say.
I have a drone that's flying up
and
down the East River, telling people to go inside. Why does the NYPD have a drone? And it should be my right to blow it out of the sky. I mean, it's just the point that I'm making is that this type of activity is going to come to a city near you in America because our citizens are not standing up and saying no to the police department. There is no reason why they need military-grade equipment. And it's in my opinion, with the Second Amendment, it was about symmetry. It was about the citizens being able to have symmetry with weapons against the government. When the government has more weapons to the citizens in terms of firepower, the lethalness of the firepower, then it's asymmetric, and the citizens can't fight for their rights. And that is what's happened with these police officers. They have weapons that the citizens can't own, and now it's asymmetric.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up drones. I was going to mention that, but you covered it for me there.
So, I mean, Jeffrey, I mean, tell me what you think. I mean, you're an agency guy. I mean, it's getting to the point where the citizens are gonna start uprising.
It seems like
they're not going to put up with it. They're not going to put up with it anymore. And it's going to go kinetic. There's going to be people that are going to say, you know what? I am tired of being forced this and that, and my wealth is being eroded. And these certain events with these false flags that are instituted. I mean, look at what has happened to Gen X. Gen X has been destroyed financially through the dot-com bubble, what happened to 9/11, what happened to Lehman, and the Wuhan crisis. No other generation has had to go through so much economic hardship.
Tell me about it.
Pretty wild.
And I'll tell you, the Gen Xers are starting to get really pissed off. And it was our generation that started listening to the death metal. And that was in our adolescence. So if you start tapping into that hate, you're going to be able to galvanize a new revolution in this country.
Hell yeah.
Jeffrey, your thoughts and opinions. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with you for the most part. So I got to go, when I was in Special Force, I got to go to Special Operations Tactic. That's surgical shooting, hostage rescue, rappelling in like in Captain America and actually shooting around.
Nice.
Guys would sit behind targets, and we shot a lot. So I am a very good at gunfighting. I think CAG, Crisis Action Applications Group, Combat Applications Group, Delta is the best in the world at that. And so what has happened since almost 2 decades of GWAT, Government War on Terror, is we've got all these fabulous veterans, so much better than I was. And they are like Tom Cotton in the Senate is awesome. He's out of Arkansas, where Clinton came from. I can't think of that SEAL's name. He's awesome. There's a lot of veterans in there becoming police officers. So you do need like a SWAT team. And those guys need to be well trained, and they are so much more well trained than they were when I was in DEA. I was on the Special Operations Snowcap. It was we went to a light version of Ranger School, and but the whole militarization of every police force is. I do agree with you on that, and where that happened initially was with ATF at Waco. They had killed the family members at Ruby Ridge. They wanted to make amends, so they wanted the spectacular raid. The sheriff knew Koresh. He could have gone to Koresh any time, the old sheriff there. And by the way, when the DA was going after me, they compared me to Koresh as a cult leader.
Whoa.
Which is
Wow.
So I founded Christ Connection Chaplaincy. You can go to christchaplaincy.com. It's a 501c3. I'm ordained. And they called Warrior School a cult. And of course, if it is, then most of my cult members are government employees and military. but they just make ridiculous. So the template that they used on Trump, on Flynn, is the same. It's the same template. They've done the same thing to me, and they just do it over and over again. But ATF, when they did the raid, they didn't really have an ops plan. There was a Delta guy there who said afterwards that they wrote the plan afterwards, which is true, because we have an operations plan when we're going to do something. What if this happens? What if that happens? What's our alternative? Now, I'm sure you've seen Black Hawk Down.
Oh, great movie, yes.
Those guys are just amazing heroes, and I'm privileged to know some of those amazing guys. But, they already had a plan for what if a Black Hawk goes down? Well, we're going to move to the helicopter. They already had planned for that. That's how we plan. That's the level of planning we do. So law enforcement has never really gotten that, just like they've never gotten intelligence and counterintelligence. There was customs. Now it's ICE, but back in my day it was customs. And there was this young Spanish-speaking agent that was moving up, and she was great. And it turned out that she was a plant by the cartels.
Oh, shit.
And
Wow.
she's in federal prison now. But the way in the military and intelligence, the way we do counterintelligence and military operations, police have never grasped that, and the FBI has never really grasped that. And so, for example, the FBI has foiled about 21 or 22 terrorism plots. And every once in a while, you'll hear FBI arrests some young Muslim guy who was going to blow something up. Well, 19 to 20 of those are where the FBI gets an informant and goes and finds some angry young Muslim kid and goes, "Hey, are you mad at the United States?" "Yeah." "Would you like to blow something up?" "Sure." "You got any explosives?" "No." "Well, we'll get you some." "You got any money?" "No." "Well, we'll get you some." "You got a target?" "No." "Well, here's a target." And it's not real explosives, and they take him up to the point, and then they arrest him. Again, look it up.
Mm-hmm.
A patsy.
So in the old days, we called that entrapment.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I did a drug reverse, I had to actually sell the guy real drugs, and then we would take him off later. and we had to take the drugs off. That's the other problem with ATF. So because otherwise, if I sold him fake drugs, I took him to court, like, were the drugs real? No. Well, where's the crime? Well, that's gone by the wayside in court. And the other thing, and I can give about an hour speech I've given many times on Fast and Furious, is my Fast and Furious friends, the whistleblowers, Vince Cefalu, John Dotson, the heroes that stood up in Fast and Furious, fabulous guys. Can't say enough of good things about them, and have gone on stage and apologized for not speaking out sooner about what happened, because Brian Terry was murdered about 45 minutes from where I'm sitting here. I know the guys who carried his body out, and all of that, but they don't do reverses. They said we wouldn't sell guns to somebody. We just don't do it. We do reverses in the DEA. We pretend to be drug dealers and sell drugs, but I would have to take those drugs off. So what I do is, after I was undercover selling the drugs, I would get a Tucson police officer or a county sheriff marked car to pull over the guy with the drugs and say, hey, your taillight was out, or you were weaving or something. And he'd say, you don't have any drugs or weapons in the car, right? And the guy says, no, of course not. So, well, my canine's been sitting in the car all day. And you wouldn't mind if I ran my canine just for a little exercise, get him out of the car. Sure. Well, canine alerts, get the drugs, and they take them. And the guy does more deals or whatever, and he doesn't know that I've taken him off. But the point is, I have to take off the drugs. Because if I let the coke or the marijuana go out into the street, and when I go to court before the judge goes, so Special Agent Prather, you want to put the defense attorney, Special Agent Prather, you want to put, he's got me on the stand. You want to put my client in jail? Yeah. Why? He's a drug dealer. Why? Well, drugs are chemical slavery. They destroy lives. Well, so you sold my client 2 kilos of cocaine, right? Yeah, I did. And so what'd he do with them? Well, I don't know. He sold them on the street, and he probably distributed them to, women and children, and now they're chemically addicted. It's chemical slavery. He goes, well, Special Agent Prather, then what's the difference between you and my client?
Nice.
You got to be kidding.
And so but that's what they would say. And so the answer is, we got to take it off. So that's what I tell audiences. I'm giving you a brief.
Wow.
So in ATF, in Fast and Furious, they didn't run 10. They didn't run 20. They didn't run 100. They didn't run 1,000. They ran over 2,000 guns into Mexico they didn't take them off, and they didn't track them. ATF is a law enforcement agency. It's not the CIA. It's not supposed to do covert gun running operations like the CIA has done. Okay? But they did. And that's kind of how I went from hero to zero with the DEA.
Understood. My God.
Wow. So that would mean that Holder did something totally illegal.
Big time.
Holder perjured himself multiple times under oath and in writing, and I had a suit against Holder because he said I was a cult leader, so I brought an EO suit against my Christian faith, and he dismissed it.
That's pretty heavy.
When you try to expose them, they always go after you to try to discredit you or destroy you. That was the point I'm making. Is that these agencies are running rogue. So what do we do as citizens to stop it?
So
we can't let this happen. Continue.
We stand up. We say we're going to open this area up. We do shows like this. We keep informing, because a lot of it, like you're saying with Gen X, is they just don't know. They don't know what's going on. So these citizen journalist shows like this is why I'm doing. This is why I do these shows, is because I'm still serving and getting the truth out there as opposed to the propaganda. And then you support candidates. Like I am all for supporting former military candidates for office. I've done quite a few because they have an ethic of selfless service. Because that's a profession where you may have to kill a guy.
I agree with you. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. I was not anymore, but I was a fan of McCain. All right, and he war hero and all this, but when you start diving into his true personality behind the scenes, he wasn't that. That whole facade starts to erode. All right. So in most cases,
I knew McCain. Yeah, I agree with you totally. I agree with you totally.
So, in most cases, I would say that, a someone that served in our military definitely should be in Congress representing us because of their experience and their wisdom through that experience. But when they become a fossil, in the Senate, like McCain became, you get corruption and stuff. So I don't know. It's beyond it. What I'm trying to articulate is that I've been talking on my show about this crisis, this Wuhan crisis, since January 25th every day. And I do not 20 minutes, I do hours worth of commentary, hours worth. And every day I've not stopped. And I go on to other shows and talk for hours. And I like trying to inform the public. And I'm learning as I'm going. I call it on the battlefield, the fog of war. We're learning as we're going. We all have something to contribute to this. But there is a certain point when it comes to the erosion of our civil liberties where enough is enough and talk needs to turn into action. And what I'm noticing is that the people that are listening to shows like this and my show, maybe even your show, Jeffrey, they are reaching out to their representatives, but their representatives aren't listening. So at what point does it go kinetic? Because I'll tell you, the people are really getting fed up with seeing that their wealth being eroded. And then now we're walking with high probability into forced vaccines.
So McCain, brought the dossier, the fake dossier that was sponsored by the Russians as disinformation. He brought it in.
Right.
He was a total rhino. And when I talk about vets, I'm not talking about that generation. I'm talking about the GWAT generation, the guys that signed up after 9/11, the guys that left the stock market, the guys that Pat Tillman, who left his professional football career and said, I'm going to go serve my country. Those guys, that's the next greatest generation. Just like the World War II generation, that post 9/11 GWAT generation that has been fighting for almost 2 decades, they are the best trained. They are battle-hardened veterans, and they are coming out and they are going into office. That's who I'm talking about, not the McCains. McCain, yeah, I
agree with you. I agree with you on that.
But where does it go kinetic? Well, first of all, I want to make sure you record this. I'm not advocating for violence because the government keeps coming after me, and they're looking for anything to come after me. So I'm not advocating.
But the thing is that it is our obligation and our right to support that Constitution and what that American flag represents. Every citizen.
It is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let me answer you. Here's the point where it would go kinetic. Not that I'm advocating that, because they just came after me again last year. So I got it. They went after me for 5 years. So so if the Barr and Durham things peter out, if nothing happens, I think that you're going to see something happen. I think that it'll be like Starship Troopers with Robert Heinlein. After democracy fell and the veterans took over.
Yeah, but here's something to keep, gentlemen. When our country was a young country, and 200 years ago, there were a lot less people living here, and weapons were not as advanced as they are today. I feel, based on what the doc is saying, what would happen if America rose up? The problem I would see is that the government has the connection to the military to strike on the people and call them rebels per se, and not revolutionaries.
See, the way I would counter that is that each military person has an oath to protect that Constitution from domestic and foreign enemies.
So let me jump in there, please, because I'm one of those guys, and so I know the oath keeper guys, and I know how this works. I've already seen this happen. And on my show, there's an episode where they were talking about Virginia banning long guns. And, Virginia is next to D.C., but those are good old Southern boys, Quanticos, and they were all up in arms about that. It didn't happen. But I was talking about it on the show, and people used to ask me under the Obama administration, I'd be giving a speech, and they're like, when's the military going to revolt? And I'm like, we're not going to revolt. We're not going to George Washington would turn over in the grave. He gave up power 3 times. We're not going to revolt. We will ride this out. And he goes, well, what if there's martial law under Obama? And the same answer, I said there won't be, but if it was, it would fail, because every time Obama tries to do anything tactically, it falls apart, because he talks to Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice. He doesn't talk to his military guys. The same thing with Virginia. And I had a caller who called into my show, and he goes, "Hey, I used to be in the Virginia National Guard. I'd be the guy who." I'm like, "Yeah, great. Who has the guns in Virginia?" He goes, "We do." the gun owners are the cops, are the patriots, are the National Guard guys, are the retired veterans, and they are not going to turn on the citizenry. They are the citizenry. It wouldn't work. It won't happen.
Oh, I see.
It won't happen. We won't do it. I guarantee you, we will not do it.
I get it now. I understand. Thank you. I understand now.
It won't happen.
That's good news. That's great.
Yeah, that's great news.
We are the guys and gals who sign up to fight, kill, and die for this country. We are not going to turn on this country. And if you think about it, so ATF was at Ruby Ridge and Waco, and the FBI did where they burned everybody down. At Wounded Knee, do you guys know about Wounded Knee?
Right.
I know of it.
Okay, so nobody pays attention to the natives, but the second Wounded Knee, not the first time where they massacred the Lakota people,
right,
and Cheyenne people, but the second time, the 82nd Airborne was there, and they said, we're not going to do it. Because we got a bunch of Lakota and Cheyenne in the 82nd Airborne. We're not going to do it. Not that Sand Creek, our military, my army has massacred women and children. It's a terrible sin. But today's military, it will not happen. We will not do it.
What a world we live in. What a world we live in.
It really is. Pretty astonishing, to say the least. And of course, we are coming up to a close here very soon. And of course, Jeffrey, you also mentioned Pizzagate during one of your Prather Point reports.
Yeah, I do. And I'm kind of delving into that. And the corollary there is what we're doing on these citizen journalist show. This is a citizen journalist show. Paul's show is a citizen journalist show, as opposed to the propaganda press. And they can't stop all of us. And that is educating the public. And so I'm sure you guys are familiar with Q and the QAnons. Yes?
Yes.
I have to admit I'm as knowledgeable as I should be, but I've heard a little bit about it.
See, I think that the whole Q thing is just a psyop.
Okay, it could be. It could be. But it looks like that some patriots came to Trump, some patriots inside the military intelligence, the DIA probably. Q could be Trump, Q could be Flynn. I'm not Q. The Anons are the Anons out there, but they said, hey, the deep state's taken over our country. I can tell you for sure that federal law enforcement has an unholy alliance with the intelligence community. I know it. I just can't talk about it. But there were 2 ways to take our country back. One was open revolution, lots of people die, kinetic. And the other was to start pulling back the curtain, revealing the deep state,
right,
indicting and firing them. And if you look at what's been going on, if you look at the FBI leadership, the DOJ, if you look at the intelligence community, if you look at the Hollywood elite, if you look at the educational elite, that's exactly what's been happening. And every week and every day, and if you look at Trump's tweets, all that stuff is happening. The indictments have actually started to happen. I talked about them on my show, and you're starting to see a shift because it's who wins is the most in a war, in a fight. It's who is the most committed, and the most committed has some kind of transcendent connection. For me, that's a Judeo-Christian native connection. That's what I think American exceptionalism is. The left's their ideology is continually shifting. I mean, they're running a guy who can't even, he walks off stage, he can't string sentences, and his son owns 10% in Bohai Harvest in China, as well as Ukraine.
Right.
So the psyop of this, which is a force multiplier, is telling them what's going on, telling the people that don't know, because what the FBI is saying is we're the FBI. Like, so what? There was a time we didn't have the FBI. What about Bonnie and Clyde? Well, you didn't get Bonnie and Clyde. 2 Texas Rangers got Bonnie and Clyde. No, but that's what you think, right? When you think, who got Bonnie and Clyde? FBI. No, they didn't. They couldn't find them. 2 old Texas Rangers got them. But
I thought Elliot Ness got Bonnie and Clyde.
you have to. There's a great show on that. Costner made a little movie about that. The truth about that. But the point is, you slowly educate them, and you slowly start telling them the truth. And I mean, does anybody think that Biden can beat Trump? Does anybody seriously believe that?
Not a chance.
No. This Biden is like, there's no way Biden's going to win.
I'm glad you mentioned Biden, by the way, because I do have audio of him being questioned about his other activities he was up to, alleged activities, I should say.
Well, Michael, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I got to tell you what you're about to bring up. I mean, you're going to talk about this with the alleged molestation, right?
No, I wasn't going to play that audio. It's actually him denying it happened.
Oh, okay. Well, here's, if I may just interject for a second. I heard yesterday how Nancy Pelosi is, she believes when he's claiming that he's innocent, but at the same time, when Judge is that what his name was?
Kavanaugh.
Right, Kavanaugh.
Right.
I mean, there was just insanity about him, particularly because of the fact that he was a Republican. And here this guy, Joe Biden, is being accused, but he's investigating it. There's no investigation going on. And it's just that. It's been, 20, 30 years of accusations, and nobody's doing a goddamn thing because he's a Democrat? Give me a break. Okay, now you can talk.
Right on. And yes, I do have audio here. Let's play the audio. Jeffrey, are you ready?
Sure.
I won't play all of it. It's kind of long, but we'll get a few moments in here.
About your University of Delaware records. Do you agree?
By the way, this is the Morning Joe show. It's pretty awful.
With the reporting that those records were supposed to be revealed to the public, and then they were resealed for a longer period of time until after you leave, quote, public life. And if you agree with that, if that's what happened, why did that happen?
Because, look, the fact is that there's a lot of things of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, all of those things relating to my job. And the idea that they would all be made public, in the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. Their papers are position papers. They are documents that existed, and that when I, for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign at this time, I don't know of anybody who's done anything like that. And so the National Archives is the only place there would be anything having to do with personnel records. There are no personnel records in the Biden papers at the university.
So personnel records aside, are you certain there was nothing about Tara Reid in those records? And if so,
I am absolutely certain.
Why not approve a search of her name in those records?
Approve a search of her name.
Yes, and reveal
not-
anything that might be related to Tara Reid in the University of Delaware records.
There is nothing. They wouldn't. They're not there. And if it's, I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
The point
There
I'm
are
trying to
no
make
personnel
is that
records
you
by
are,
definition.
The point I'm trying to make is that you are approving and actually calling for a search of the National Archives records of anything pertaining to Tara Reid. I'm asking why not do the same in the University of Delaware records, which have raised questions because they were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were sealed for a longer period of time. Why not do it for both sets of records?
Because the material in the University of Delaware has no personnel files, but it does have a lot of confidential conversations that I had with the president about a particular issue, that I had with the heads of state of other places, that would not be something that would be revealed while I was in public office or while I was seeking public office. It just stands to reason. To the best of my knowledge, no one else has done that either.
I'm just talking about her name, not anybody else in those records. A search for that.
Wow.
Nothing classified with the president or anybody else. I'm just asking why not do a search for Tara Reid's name in the University of Delaware records?
Look, I mean, who does that search?
Wow.
The University of Delaware. Perhaps you set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
Well, look, Mika, she said she filed a report. She has her employment records still. She said she refiled a report with the only office that would have a report in the United States Senate at the time. If the report was ever filed, it was filed there, period.
And that's all we got for this evening. My goodness, that was Joe Biden. I'm not sure what your thoughts and opinions are, but Jeffrey, let's start with you. What did you make of that?
Well, I think this is elder abuse at this point, but they do plenty of child abuse. Anyway, I don't think he understands what a name search is on a computer.
Probably doesn't.
But he's wandered off stage. He's mixed up his wife and his sister. He's, just stops. I think I think that the Dems are doing this because if Barr and Durham go forward, they're not trying to win elections. They're trying to stay out of jail, and they're willing to do anything to do that, including shut down the economy. And I think that's what's happened. Pizzagate, that's a whole nother show, really.
It's another realm.
And there is a lot of evidence of that. There's a lot of evidence from Clinton, from it being mentioned on the Clinton investigation by Huber to Huma Abedin's Wiener convicted, to Bill, to Epstein, to Weinstein. There's a lot. There was just a child trafficking found with China and Ukraine going on. So there is certainly plenty there, but I think that the curtain is being pulled back gradually.
Right.
So that people can accept it, because again, that's the Q philosophy. Is either it's kinetic, it's bloodshed, or it's slowly changing things. And the second, of course, was the choice.
See,
Go ahead, Paul.
From the Q perspective, there was so much talk about convicting Hillary, indicting her and all this. It never happened.
Nope.
And I was a Q follower the first maybe 16 months of Trump's presidency. And once I started seeing that she wasn't going to go to jail, and she wasn't even going to be indicted or investigated, I started losing faith in Q. And it almost turned into like a cult of on the internet, and you had people building whole YouTube channels on reading the breadcrumbs of Q, and like Dr. Corsi. And I don't know.
Yeah, no,
unless something really happens,
Yeah, you're
I
not
just
on
don't
board.
believe the guy.
You're not
so
on board.
I do agree with you that the Q is God and Trump is God and they're going to solve all the problems and just trust the plan. And I can tell you, no plan goes according to plan.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of Q proofs, and there have been. So, but think about this. So if I had done, and any of us, my peerage, what Hillary had done, we'd be in federal prison forever.
Oh, I
For
agree.
sure. So, again, I used to get woken up in the middle of the night when I had the duty because a Border Patrol agent would call me and say, hey, I got 5 illegals with 200 pounds of marijuana. And I'm like, okay, give me the details. All right, I'll call you back. I'd get out my old Motorola brick phone. I'd page the duty attorney, assistant United States attorney. He'd call me back. And then I'd give him the facts. And he'd say, oh, we'll take that one or we'll not take that one. I call the Border Patrol back and say, okay, we're going to take that. So hold them. I'll get up, get dressed, and drive down there. Or we're not going to get that. Get their bio record and hold the dope, and I'll pick it up in the morning. So the point is, it's any agent knows, any basic agent student at Quantico knows, you don't make the call. The attorney makes the call. So when Comey came out and said, this case is not good enough to present to the U.S. Attorney Lynch, we all knew the fix was in. Yeah, totally. And we knew, and of course, in the Phoenix tarmac conversation has since been revealed. And of course, Clinton was at the Epstein Island all the time, and we know he was a serial molester. So, but on the other hand, then we saw the whole Trump phony investigation. The first line of the Mueller report, the Mueller report is a dossier on a dossier. Both are phony. There is no evidence that the DNC was hacked by the Russians. None. The first line of the Mueller report is a lie. The FBI never got the DNC servers.
How did these people get away with these accusations? Honestly.
So my point is this, and I get this question all the time. And I'll tell you, no one is more impatient than me. But if you're Trump and you're top, so I worked for the executive branch, military, law enforcement, intelligence, that's all executive branch stuff.
Right.
If the top guys are all against you, what can you do? Well, the first thing you got to do is start firing them and getting rid of them. It's tough to do with senior executives, SESs. It's tough. There's a huge bureaucracy put up there. So, and every time he's doing something, they throw something else up there. It's taken a while, but if you look at the DOJ, it's cleaned. The top level is cleaned out. If you look at the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, and the IC, it's cleaned out. And so they're slowly moving through that process.
Yeah, but when I'm looking at this particular crisis, you see Fauci and Birx and Redfield. We have a similar situation happening where they're trying to Yeah, go ahead.
Obama squelched an investigation into Fauci by the FBI.
Yeah, man,
but the reason for this is because all of this really goes back to Obama. Just like some ATF supervisors in Phoenix did not say, hey, Bill, yeah, Roger, hey, what are you doing this morning? Nothing. Hey, you want to do an international covert gun running operation? Yeah, I'm not doing anything. No, that stuff, those are called SARC, Special Activity Review Committee missions. I've done them. That goes all the way up. That goes to POTUS, that goes to Secretary of State, that goes all over the place. It's not two guys, two supervisors in Phoenix. The Fast and Furious emails go to the White House. All of this goes back to Obama. So if you're gonna do this, and I'm not saying it's gonna happen, I'm just hoping, but I'm telling you why it takes a long time.
Right.
Is you got to fight through your corrupted system.
Do you think we'll ever see justice?
I do, because I have faith and hope. I have faith and hope in God, and I have faith and hope in America.
I have a lot of faith. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, with all due respect, I mean, I have hope too, and with my hope, I haven't got any justification or satisfaction seeing people like the Clinton in jail.
Yeah, I am totally in line with what Mike's saying. I'm a person of prayer and action. You can't just have action. You also you need prayer, but you can't just pray. You have to couple it with action.
And so there is action. If you look at the top levels of the DOJ and the IC, they're gone.
Okay, well, I agree with you on that. But here's what just if the Democrats had control of the Senate, we would have lost our president.
We would.
That's how close we almost lost here.
So I'm getting a text right now because I got lots of soldiers, spies, and cops listening, and and some of them will call in, a lot of them won't. But he's saying that selected reserve troops have been activated to fight the cartels. Why is that significant? Remember, I got in trouble for trying to extradite the first Mexican cartel leader. Why? Because they have bought off Congress members.
Right.
Their cartels have more money than countries. And
sickening.
They have bought
That's
up. They have bought
correct.
up. So what has Trump done? Trump is building the border. He's closed off. He's cutting off that money supply.
Thank
Stuff
God.
is happening. Stuff is happening, and most of it is happening behind the scenes. But stuff is happening now. Will Barr come through? I don't know. Barr defended the FBI at Ruby Ridge and Waco. That's a bad sign. But Rosenstein in the DOJ, he was saying, "Hey, do you want me to wear a wire?" I think he flipped. I think I'm hearing that Baker flips. I think people are watching the way the wind blows, and they're going to go with it, and they're giving them chances to flip. But what I'm saying is, there's a reason. I can certainly see why this takes a long time. It's not a TV show. It's not a movie. I've worked cases for 5 years. This stuff takes a lot of time, especially when everybody's working against you.
Yeah, but my concern is that we don't have time to eat. Eat up the clock, because I see that there's a larger orchestrated plan to erode our civil liberties. And if we just say, well, we're just going to sit back and hopefully the powers that we voted in will do the right thing, I'm afraid, from what I've seen the last 47 years of my life, that they're not going to pull through. And then it'll be too late.
So it's happening. The Oath Keepers are a bunch of mostly ex-military and paramedics and cops. And so I'll tell you an example of how this has actually happened. So when Obama went down, sent the Department of Agriculture down to Guatemala and stuff, and I've worked in Guatemala, and said, "Hey, come on up." And he was just trying to bring all the illegals up. Okay. The Border Patrol patriots were calling the Oath Keepers and saying, "Hey, they're going to bring them here." Try to do that to a boys' home here in Arizona. The Oath Keepers got out there and blocked the bus. So patriots on the inside were contacted, Oath Keeper patriots on the outside, and blocking and turning those things away. And more, there are patriots standing up. Now, granted, there were no real whistleblowers like me blowing the whistle on the FBI. That's very damning. And in the CIA, that's very damning. There should have been guys down below, special agents, GS-13s, criminal investigators like me, or case officers that should have been blowing the whistle and did not.
I agree
now,
with you.
There has been some. There was a black case officer at CIA, and the Attorney General put him in jail for talking about the Iran deal. There's been some, but there haven't been that many.
Well, there's a lot to lose. I mean, you risk going to jail, you risk that pension, maybe even your family getting whacked. There's all sorts of things into play you got to consider that are
Well, Admiral Rogers at the NSA stood up. He's the guy who warned Trump and did not give high confidence on the Russian phony dossier. And Flynn wanted to investigate, and Flynn, of course, was head of my old agency, DIA. And Flynn said two things when he was coming in. He said, I want to reform the intelligence community, which is really drain the deep state swamp in popular terms. And he said, and I'm not going to disbelieve Pizzagate until it's disproven. And then they went after Flynn.
See, my take on this is that, it is important to go after these pedophiles and all that, but there's something way bigger going on. And that is it is the erosion of our constitutional rights and our biological freedoms, what I call the Bio-Patriot Act. What right after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act, and they had eroded our civil liberties. The citizens were willing to allow for the Patriot Act because of a unique terrorist situation, with the understanding that we were going to go back to a pre-9/11 day, which never happened. And what happened was places like NYPD in New York City, and it ends up getting military grade equipment. And now they're flying drones up and down the East River and the Hudson. All right. So and then you have Jade Helm and all this stuff.
Well, so
my concern, but with this Wuhan crisis, it's going to lead towards something I call the Bio-Patriot Act, where they're going to start eroding more of our civil liberties to, quote, keep us protected. And they're the ones that made the weapon.
They are. You're right. They are. But let me give you an insider's perspective of that, because I think we're winning. I think, I tell people all the time, this is what winning looks like. It's not pretty, it's not easy, it's not fast, but all the stuff that was covered up, JFK assassination, all that stuff, the citizen journalists like us are exposing all that. They can't cover it up anymore, and people are starting to stand up. This is what
let me give you an example, and this hits home close to me. All right. So not only do I do my show and discuss about COVID-19 and all of its components, the scientific component, the geopolitical component, the sovereignty component, current events, all I cover it all. But I understand the aspects of homeopathy and nutraceuticals. All right. And I learned by talking to many people what people could take, and looking at the research, not just people's opinions, but published research, and what people could take that can reduce inflammation and boost their immune system. Because I'm worried about my citizens in this country getting sick, because there's a serious comorbidity issue if you contract COVID-19 disease. Well, there's two major suppliers for nanosilver. All right. One is ABL, which is American Biotech Labs. Another is My Doctor Suggests. My Doctor Suggests was just rated by the FDA, the FBI, where they confiscated his laboratory and his means to distribute, and and totally closed down his operations.
Wow.
Right? That just happened April 29th.
Oh my God.
All right. That's 2 days ago. All right. So now one of my suppliers can't provide me something that will boost people's immune system so they have a fighting chance on something that Fauci designed and paid for. And our citizens need to start standing up and stop waiting. We don't have time to wait. And we need to start saying no. And we wait another 12 months, there's going to be an executive order that says, here's your forced vaccine, because we're too afraid that we're going to be going back into a serious recession, because there's going to be a second and a third wave. And the thinking would be, give everybody the vaccine to prevent the economic calamity. And the president has the power to do that forced order. He's not going to do it before the election, but he sure as hell will do it after the election. He will win this election. But that's just why they're saying this warp speed, Operation Warp Speed, with this vaccine, because he's going to win the election. That's in November, and he'll push it out in January or February because they're worried about that second and third wave because of gain of function with this weapons program. And I'm saying that we don't have time to wait.
So you're saying that Trump is going to force a vaccine?
Yes. I think he's going to do an executive order in January or February. When the second wave hits, we're going to go back into shelter in place, and it's going to be such an economic calamity. It's going to be another $4 trillion loss.
Yeah, that was one of the.
This country cannot. We already lost $4 trillion. We have just less than $20 trillion economy. There's 30 million people laid off. Some people are going to go back to work once we get out of shelter in place, but we're going to go back into shelter in place when we have the second wave.
Absolutely, like a W.
And we're going to lose another $4 trillion of our GDP. That's $8 trillion lost.
Yeah, I'm actually quite concerned of a economic collapse, no doubt here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very concerning.
The deep state and the New World Order wants this country to fall. And what is what's our strengths?
Why?
It's our manufacturing base and our economic prowess.
Why would they even feel that way, though? Why would, it makes you think, why would anybody want this country to fall? It's beyond me.
They want us to get integrated in a one world government. And it's people like us.
That's true.
Right. And if we're weakened economically, then everyone's going to say, "Oh, I want my basic income." I'm hungry now, and just feed me. They they increase our cortisol levels to such a high degree that we'll do anything to just let the pain go away.
Right.
I mean, it's the same operations in the military when you circle your enemy and you just bombard them and just keep on bombarding them until they bleed from the ears, and then they're just begging for us to stop.
Jump in there, Jeff.
Can I just?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, I appreciate your passion and I understand it. So I don't see that scenario because Trump. I am sure that Trump knows that this is biowarfare and bioespionage. And he said things about that. The problem is we're not going to declare war on China like we did on Japan because we're too dependent on China for manufacturing right now. But I am sure that Trump is going to change that. He has said that many times.
I'm not sure if Trump understands that a messenger RNA platform vaccine is a Trojan horse to mess up our genome.
Let me finish, okay?
I'm sorry.
So it's okay. Missouri and Mississippi are already suing China. Now states may not be able to, but under the International Health Treaty with the World Health Organization through the UN, we can certainly sue China, and so can all the other states that have been damaged by this as the evidence comes out. And I think that China has violated international law. And you're already starting to see our allies start to pull. Britain just pulled 5G from China. I think you're going to see more of that. And now you mentioned bombing. So let me tell you something about bombing. Hitler bombed, we bombed the North Vietnamese, and studies have been done. Bombing doesn't discourage anybody. You get rid of the electricity and everybody is back to a tribal condition. And you know what it does? It increases connection and resolve between people. It increased the resolve of the London people. It increased the resolves of the North Vietnamese people. The only exception to that is nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is a different kind of bombing. So I disagree because after Trump helped this great economy get going, and he knows that the Chinese and the Dems have destroyed it, I don't think Trump is ever going to give in I think he knows that this is a fight to the death. Trump has never shirked from a fight. He's not afraid of a fight. He's not God. He's not the answer. We got to do our part. But it would be totally uncharacteristic of him to all of a sudden give in.
Right, brother.
My concern, I mean, I'm a Trump supporter, and I will vote for him, and I've been a Trump supporter from day one. But my concern is that if there is a second wave and people have to go back to shelter in place, that it's going to be such a devastation to the economy that it's going to force Trump's hand, and he's going to believe the scientists that are somewhat part of the problem.
I disagree.
And I don't trust that messenger RNA platform. It scares
disagree.
me.
Doc, you know why I disagree with you? I think President Trump is one of the only presidents to ever come into into office who has a connection with the American people, with the average Joe Schmo. That I believe. I think he'd have quicker connect people who are on the outside, so to speak, on the outside part of the party per se, and I just believe that he would have more connection with the people than any other president.
No, I think that's, you're right. Absolutely, I think that's very true. And he's gonna sense the hardship that people are gonna have economically,
right?
And because of that, he's gonna be judging based on emotion, and he's gonna turn to his quote expert scientists, and the expert scientists are going to say, well, Mr. President, we have Moderna that has this messenger RNA platform that we can use as a vaccine. And he goes, well, will it work? Well, yes, Mr. President. Well, what's stopping it? Well, we need it. We need to do clinical trials that take 18 months. But, maybe we could fast track it. Well, let's fast track it. See, I'm not sure that he has a scientific know-how to understand what a messenger RNA platform means.
I see what you're saying.
I wouldn't be worried if it was just an regular antibody vaccine program, let's say from Distributed Bio. But we're talking about the Moderna thing that Fauci's all connected to, and that is a messenger RNA platform, and you can sneak something in through that. You can't sneak something in very easily with a antibody type vaccine. This messenger RNA platform could have reverse transcriptase. This virus could be. Remember, I was saying there was an acute phase and a chronic phase. They may need for the chronic phase the messenger RNA to come in to do part B of this infection. The messenger RNA platform is a Trojan horse. And anyone in the scientific community, if they're honest, could say, yes, if you're diabolical, yes, that could happen. And we are dealing with diabolical people. And that's why I don't think that Trump is seeing the big picture. That they are trying to kill us with that vaccine program. And they'll make money on top of it. So I'm not sure. I think Trump's the good guy. Not positive, but I'm going to still vote for him. But I tell you, he's going to be put in a situation where he's going to say, I can't lose another $4 trillion in the economy. I got to do something. And he's going to say, what's in the arsenal? Well, we got this thing from Moderna. Well, let's try it.
Hope it doesn't come to that.
The scientific community is painted Trump into a corner, and I'm not so sure he's smart enough to see it. That's all I'm saying.
Your thoughts, Jeffrey? That's a lot to.
I don't think that Trump's going to be intimidated. I think he is smart enough to see the big picture. That whole UV light thing. That they were scoffing at, then it quickly came out that there are intravenous UV lights. He's working with the business people, and you're seeing that he brought in business people who were not doing stuff and put them up there and said, hey, we're working with the business community. And I think he is smart enough to figure that out. And if he isn't, the American people are. And I'm on Team America, and we're going to win.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, but if Trump sees the plan, then why isn't he like shining a light on Fauci and Birx and say, well, wait a minute, you guys, you were part of a weapons program that's completely tied to this.
So I can answer that very clearly. And so and you can watch this, you can watch Trump and you can watch Barr, and you can watch Pence, you can all watch them go, when Barr went before Congress, he's like, well, I'm going to see, there was spying, but I'm going to see the predicate. You got to be very calm, because if you just turn on people on TV, that's going to alienate everybody from you. I agree with Michael. Trump has a phenomenal connection. I don't know the last president that had the connection with the American people that Trump has. Trump is clearly on our side. You can see all he has endured. I mean, I've endured a lot. I can tell you, the government coming after me. Trump has endured more. I wrote him. He wrote me back. It's really tough to endure. Trump knows this is a zero-sum game. He knows this is a fight to the death. He is not going to be they're not going to give him any quarter. And I think he is smart enough to figure this out. And I think he will figure it out. And I think we'll figure it out, and we will triumph.
You know, his intentions are definitely there. I mean, just the fact that the guy gives his money as president to the vets, I mean, that says a lot in my opinion. I think he's got a heart bigger than most people think, despite the fact he's a billionaire, and despite the fact that he's definitely one of those puff asses you just can't put down, like Jeffrey said. And I don't know. I got faith in the guy. You know what I'm scared of? You know what I'm scared of, Doc? I'm scared of after 4 years what happens after he's out of office. That's what I'm scared of.
Well, yeah, I mean that goes right in line with the 2025 plan, where they're going to check the hegemony of the Navy with the CCP. So I mean, we have to handle this crisis, but there's another crisis on the horizon. There's this almost like a roar in the distance.
So
a war of this sound in the distance with the CCP and the U.S. Navy that's going to be happening in 2025, and I hope we win.
Oh, hey, let me chime in there.
Okay,
we'll win.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's...
And as far as worrying about stuff, let me tell you a quick little story about Eagle Claw. When Beckwith with Delta, the founder, was trying to rescue the Iran hostage, and that's when we talked about the CH-47. The Delta operators had already gone to sleep because the mission had been canceled when the CH-47 rotor blade slices into the C-130. The engine's running. The guys are sleeping like we all do on aircraft. They wake up. Aircraft's on fire. And Beckwith sees one of his operators jump out of the flaming aircraft into the dark in a good frog position for free fall with no parachute, and he lands in the sand. And after all the chaos is over and everything's fixed, Beckwith says, "Hey, Sergeant Jones, why were you jumping out of a burning aircraft with no parachute?" And Sergeant Jones goes, "One thing at a time, sir. One thing at
a time." That's funny.
Oh, yes. Now, Jeffrey, I do want to thank you very much for being a part of the program. We are at a close here, and I want to leave you with the final word before we part ways, Jeffrey. And we'll begin with you before we jump to Paul. But Jeffrey, go ahead and say anything you'd like, plug anything you'd like. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Keep the faith. We will win. This is what winning looks like. You can get me at jeffreyprather.com. That's JEFFREY.com is my show. And I do this every week, and happy to have been on with you guys. And you are citizen journalists, and we are going to restore our republic.
Very nice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you so
great.
much.
I love having an opportunity to talk to you. You're amazing.
Talk to you soon, Jeffrey.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Take care.
And there he goes. And now we are left with Dr. Paul Cottrell. What's going on, my friend? How are you out there?
I'm all right. I was hoping that Jeffrey would stay on just to hear. I just wanted to, thank him for his service.
Don't worry. We'll do this again, all of us.
And yeah, and just it's an amazing. He's an amazing character. He has an amazing amount of experience, and I learned a lot from him. We are moving toward, from my perspective, we're moving towards, I think, that Tea Party point where these mothers that have children, a lot of them do not want this vaccine. And Trump's Trump's talking about the vaccine. That's what whole Operation Warp Speed's all about. So I'm starting to see people around the country wanting to protest. And maybe that voice will get louder and louder as time goes on, especially when we get out of shelter in place. I hope so. I hope it's peaceful. But I'm begging my citizens out there that care about this country and this Constitution. You got to stand up and say no. That you're not going to allow for your civil liberties to be eroded. That you don't want this decashing. You don't want this forced vaccine program on you, and you don't want this surveillance state that 5G is promoting. It becomes ubiquitous. You can't opt out of it. These are really big issues.
Very.
Yeah, and the powers that be can make a lot of money through this tyranny, and that's who we're fighting up against. It's not just the government, but all the lobbying groups and all the people that can make money on this. So I just hope that they go out and exercise their right of assembly and to reach out to the representatives and say, no, we are not going to stand for this. And if you are going to go down this road, then we're not going to vote you into office. But when the government doesn't listen to you, what do you do then? That's my concern. Will we win? Yeah, we'll win. The question is will we win? As we're looking at this campfire on the screen here,
right?
We have two options here. One is to toast marshmallows and drink a beer and tell stories, right?
Right.
The other is we put more logs on there and burn the damn place down until we get what we want. Now, which path are we going to go? I want a peaceful, prosperous nation for everyone to live, to reach their goals and aspirations. But there are people that want to hurt you, and they can make money on doing it, and that's just wrong.
About to say that,
and that's the end goal for a lot of them.
Yeah.
And you're right, Paul. This is no time to sleep, and I have agreed with you wholeheartedly during this whole discussion.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I love these conversations.
Oh, me
talking
too.
To you and to Mike and everybody else that's on. These are conversations that everyone is having in their living room, or when they're watching the TV, they're screaming at the TV. In their den or whatever. This is what the big conversation is in this country. And we're doing our part as quote citizen journalists to try to inform the public. But it's not just informing. It's not just to talk. It's to act. That's we have to have action.
Right.
And it's I'll tell you, sometimes I feel down.
You get frustrated.
I feel like I get frustrated.
I hear you.
Because I don't feel like we're moving fast enough.
Yeah, I've seen that on you. Out there when you're doing your live shows, I'm like, oh no, Paul's angry. He's getting worn out. I understand though, you deal with lots of individuals out there, and speaking of which, you did a interview with someone named Miss Taiwan, I believe it was. And interesting enough, when me and Mike talked to that gentleman out there in China, he mentioned specifically not to mention Taiwan.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I thought that was interesting, right, Mike?
Yeah. Oh my.
What was that?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's do we want our country to be like the CCP, where they tell you that you can't say this and you can't say that, and it's starting to happen on social media platforms.
If I may reply to that comment, here's the problem with that. We have our grammar schools, universities, colleges, all with professors and teachers that are telling this younger generation, oh, socialism ain't that bad. Oh, okay. It's funny because all my life in school, I was taught that communism was not a decent thing, which is basically socialism. Socialism leads to communism.
Right.
And socialist country out there has hell, period. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, but so this thing in the schools where our children are, not my children, but our children are being taught that America's bad, capitalism's bad, republicanism, being publican bad.
Right.
So there you go. That's the main
I mean, even at Harvard, a prestigious university, 40% of the damn student body are socialist or communists. This country has got some serious problems. Yes, will Team America win? Yeah, but at what cost? I mean, we will win, but I just don't know when. And when I'm looking for that Boston Tea Party moment. We were talking about this, the last show. Is it these protests that are just starting? But like what I said before, we tried to have a little bit of a protest of about 50, 60 people at City Hall in New York. What happened? It was the governor that said, shut it down, NYPD. Tell them to go home. And by the time that they allow us to congregate peacefully and to protest, that's when they say, you know what? You don't have an antibody, so you need a vaccine. And it's too late.
That's how it goes, indeed.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, as I look at this little fire, this campfire here, I would say that there's about a 70% chance that we go kinetic. Because I don't think that the government is listening. They think, and the powers that be, they can make so much money on this. They don't care. They just don't care. And what are we going to do as citizens? Are we going to really protect that Constitution or not? Because if we don't protect that Constitution, then that Constitution is going to be burning in that fire.
I agree. And there's definitely an agenda behind all of this. No doubt. I mean, this whole lockdown and just how everything has been playing out. There's certainly something going on.
Jeffrey has a lot of experience.
That he does.
But what I was surprised at that he didn't zero in on, and I'm sure he knows it, but he didn't articulate it, was that they are corralling us for the kill shot. You can sense it. They've been doing it for like the last 15 years. And now it's accelerating as you move, and when you corral the cattle closer and closer, then they shoot the gun in the head.
It's all part of the agenda, Paul. That's what it really is,
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Have faith, Doc. Have faith.
I'm trying. I do have faith.
No, I know it's tough.
I do have faith, but I'll tell you. I mean, it's sad. It's sad that there's so many people that's seeing it happening, and we have representatives that very few of the representatives actually care. And a lot of them just don't care. They're not listening. They're on the take, or they can make a profit on it, or whatever. Or they're on the other side, and they'll do well. But us three and everyone that's listening right now, we're not on their other side. We're going to get the short end of the stick. And we got to do something about it before it's too late. Because I keep on tapping into what happened to my grandmother, and and the Jewish people in general. They corral you into a ghetto. They weaken you, and then they force you into a labor camp or a death camp. That's how it happened in the Holocaust. They weakened us first. We're already hearing that there's food shortages that are coming.
Oh, by the way, have you heard how they're killing off our livestock, like pigs, cows, chickens, and they're burning crops and plowing crops? I mean, what the hell is that about?
Yeah, and people don't realize it's not like a light bulb. You need months, if not years, to replenish those food stocks that are being wasted.
Yeah.
It takes a
can't
while to
believe-
grow a cow, you know.
Right, and I am appalled. You know, I mean, it's appalling to me. I'm an animal lover, so even though that these poor animals are slaughtered, it just blows my mind that they would aimlessly kill them and not even eat them.
Mhm.
Oh,
And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
animals,
yes,
if not a million or so.
millions of chickens I've heard.
Yeah.
that are.
I mean, yeah. So we're talking. Yeah. So it's pigs, cows, and chickens that are being slaughtered here, and we're going to start seeing food shortages. We already had food shortages because the crop yields were low in 2019. On top of this, I mean, I'm telling you, they're going for a kill shot. And a military guy like Jeffrey, I'm sure he sees it. But will Team America win? Yeah. But does that mean that half of us are, dying from starvation? Every bone in my body is saying we have to act now. We don't have time to waste. But exactly when do we hit that inflection point in the country where everyone is as aware as what we're saying? We're ahead of the game. But when is 60% of the population in our country actually see what we're seeing?
Well, the majority is just being misled and lied to by the media, it seems. None of them have been honest about anything.
Right, but if we're going to be just citizen journalists, because they have a louder microphone.
Well,
Our
that's
voice
right.
we have to raise the decibel level to such a feverish pitch on the internet that we drowned out the mainstream media. But their algorithms are fighting us. I mean, when I started, I was getting 200,000 hits on my YouTube channel a day, views. All right. And then they shadow banned me. Right. And I wasn't doing that as well. But if I was maintaining that going all the way back to January 25th, I would have been able to reach many more people, millions. But their algorithm will shadow ban channels like mine. And so I can't get the word out as easily. So the mainstream media narrative is going to be programmed into the citizens of our country. So again, I mean, there's so many different weapons that they're using against us, for lack of a better term, to silence us, to prevent us from getting the word out. By the time that the citizen journalists actually get the word out to enough people to make a difference, it'll be too late. Something else has to happen to galvanize.
Right. So, Paul, once again, I do want to thank you tremendously for being a part of the program. Always an honor and privilege to chat with you. And of course, we will do this again in the very near future. And yes, I agree. There's some things that we heard tonight that, I think some words were chosen very carefully, given the fact that there are people listening.
I understand his situation and
Right.
why he had to say it that way. But I just
I hear you, though. I'm right there with you.
I appreciate all your support, Michael and Mike, in our conversations. Thank you for having me. And any time that you would like me on, just let me know and I'll be on.
You got it, brother. We'll talk soon, my friend.
And it would be actually nice to actually have you two on my show.
Well, that'd be fun too.
And then we can promote your show.
No doubt. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, we'll hook that up. You want to do that, Mike?
Sounds good to me.
Absolutely.
Mike, I know Mike said.
I'd be honored.
Yeah, we'll set something up. Okay.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right, later. Bye.
Mahalo.
Take care, Doc.
Later, Mike.
And there he goes, Dr. Paul Cottrell. Check him out on his YouTube channel. Just search his name and you will find him. And Mike, go ahead and plug anything you'd like before we wrap it up here.
Oh my God, I got to catch my breath from this one, boy. I'll tell you, this was one hell of a show.
It was quite the ride.
Absolutely. Basically, guys, as usual, my artwork, horribleartwork.com, artwork and photographs, my MikeHideous.com, and that's MYKE, hideous.com. And my Facebook page is Facebook page Facebook.com/hideous Mike, MYKE. My appreciations and thank Michael. And to the audience for listening, thank you much. We love you.
Very nice. Talk to you soon, Mike.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Good night. And there he goes, boys and girls, the one and only Mr. Mike Hideous. And of course, as we take it home here tonight and pull this Larry Silverstein style, I want to thank all of you out there this evening for being a part of the program. Those in the chat room, the mods, thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Dave and Christina. Don't forget, if you are a hardcore listener of this program, there is bonus material that you can download if you direct yourself to patreon.com/Michael Decon. And of course, please subscribe to this channel if you have not already. And of course, take us on the road on Stitcher, Castbox, iTunes, and Spotify. International listeners out there, thank you so much for your support as well. Canada, Germany, the UK, Australia, Norway, and Brazil. Oh, I see you out there, no doubt. Top Talent Show yet again. What does the future have in store for all of us? 100 seconds to midnight yet again on the Doomsday Clock. Remember, whatever it is that you do, you must adapt now, as all control seems to have been lost, and there's nothing more frightening than reality. I hope you well out there, boys and girls. And with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night.
It's amazing. It's amazing. The Michael Decon program. Is the embassy.